Today's lesson is about write down the trig functions according to the given graph. First of all, you need to remember the following graph of a trig function. Y equals sine x is this pattern. Remember, you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 key points. For y equals negative sine x, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For cosine x, you will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For y equals negative cosine x is this pattern. We know that for sine function and a cosine function, this will be the transformed form. So we need to figure out on the graph where you can figure out the A, B, C, and D so that you can write down the transformed form of a sine and a cosine function. First of all, we will draw the midline for each graph. This will be y equals D. For this part, it's here, y equals D. And for cosine x, midline, that's y equals D. For negative cosine x, this one is y equals D. From the midline to the maximum points, this will be amplitude, it's A. So this part is A. From midline to the minimum value, that's A. Then where you can find the B, B equals 2 pi over P. P stands for the period. Where you can get the period, there are a lot of ways to figure out the period. For example, on the midline, every other point from here to here, that's one period. So horizontal distance for every other point on the midline, that's a period. So from here to here, the distance will be a period. Or you can figure out that period by finding the nearest maximum value, like these two. That's the period. Or you can find the minimum value. The distance will be the period. So after you figure out the period, you will find the B. B equals 2 pi over P. We already figured out the A, B, and D. C is the hardest part to figure out. We need a starting point. This one, for sine x pattern, this is a starting point. For negative sine x, this is your starting point. For cosine x, definitely this is the starting point. For y equals negative cosine x, minimum will be the starting point. For the starting point, x coordinate of a starting point equals C. Here are the steps for writing sine and cosine functions from given graph. First of all, you got to know the transformed form for sine and cosine functions. First step, you need to figure out maximum and minimum from the graph. Then here's the formula for A. Amplitude will be maximum minus minimum over 2. How to remember that? You know, A is amplitude, means distance. When you're looking for distance, we always do subtraction. So maximum minus minimum over 2, that's amplitude. For D, that's midline. So basically it's a midpoint. We know that x1 plus x2 over 2. That's how you get midpoint. Therefore, you got the maximum plus minimum over 2. Let's get the midpoint between maximum value and a minimum value. After you get D, you need to draw the midline, y equals D. This is a very critical for sine function because the starting point gets started from midline for sine function. And we know that b equals 2 pi over period for sine and cosine function. So how can you get period? Here's the 3 ways to figure out the period. The horizontal distance between two nearest maximum value or two nearest minimum value, that will be period. Or you have only one maximum value and then one minimum value. Then the distance between nearest maximum value and minimum value, you have to multiply by 2. That's how you get the period. Or the horizontal distance for every other point on the midline. That's how you get the period. After you get the A, B, D, then you need to figure out the C. We know that x coordinate of a starting point equals C. So you need to figure out the starting point. First of all, you need to analyze the sine and cosine function that you are looking for to figure out the C. If C equals 0, then the starting point is on the y-axis. If negative c greater than 0, the reason why I write down negative c, just check over here. For the transformed form of sine and cosine function, this one, if negative c greater than 0, you know that inside there is a linear rule. The apparent function will move to the left side. Therefore, your starting point will be on the left side of y-axis. If negative c less than 0, for example, we have x minus 5, then we know that it will move to the right side. Therefore, the starting point is on the right side of y-axis. Then, after you find the starting point, x coordinate is equal to c. Let's look at some examples. For number 1, the graph of p cosine qx plus r is shown below. This graph. So we need to write down this pattern. First of all, remember this transformed form of sine and cosine function. When you're working for A, B, and D, ignore this given pattern. So first step, we need to figure out that maximum value. That's 7. Minimum, that equals negative 3. So we can figure out A equals maximum minus minimum. So 7 minus negative 3 over 2, that's 5. For midline, I got 7 plus negative 3 over 2. You got 2. After you figure out the 2, we will draw midline y equals 2. For this graph, we don't know exactly where is a 2 on the y-axis, so you just estimate. Yeah, this line is y equals 2. For the period, from given graph, we only find one maximum and one minimum, which means we have to use that 2 times the horizontal distance between maximum and minimum. What's the distance between maximum and minimum? We know this is the horizontal distance. That's 4. Because the x-coordinate, this is 4. X-coordinate here is 0. So 4 minus 0 equals 4. Then we can figure out the period equals 4 times 2. We got 8. After you figure out the period, we can get the b equals 2 pi over p. That means 2 pi over 8 means pi over 4. After we figure out a, d, and b, it's time to get c. For the c part, you have to analyze the given pattern of a sine or cosine function. We got this pattern that's p times cosine qx plus r. From this pattern, we know that c equals 0. Because for this given pattern, it didn't say x minus c or x plus c, which means c equals 0. If c equals 0, we know the starting point is on the y-axis, which means this is my starting point. I need to sketch a cosine pattern. So this is the cosine pattern graph. It's a negative cosine x pattern when your starting point is on the y-axis. Therefore, we already figured out the a, b, and d. c is equal 0. Use this pattern, we can figure out a cosine function. But remember, that's a negative cosine pattern, according to the graph we draw. So y equals negative. A is 5 cosine. B is pi over 4 x. Then plus d, that's plus 2. For SL or HL exam, they normally ask you what's P equals. We compare these two functions. We know P equals negative 5. Q equals pi over 4. And R equals 2. Let's go to B. This is the pattern of a cosine function we need to figure out. First of all, look at the C. It's minus C, but C is a positive. Think about any positive number, but that's x minus. Let's, for example, do the x minus 5. X minus 5, inside is a liar, so we go to the right, which means your starting point will be on the right side of y-axis. Therefore, and I will draw the pattern of a cosine function. Starting point is on the right side. Then this is the pattern I'm drawing. For this pattern, starting point is 4, 7, which means C equals 4. X coordinate of a starting point equals C. A, B, D won't change. Therefore, I can plug into this function. This time, the pattern is a positive cosine x. This pattern, that's positive cosine x. So I will write down y equals 5. A is 5. Cosine. B is pi over 4. Then x minus, here's x minus c. So minus 4. Then plus 2. After you figure out this cosine function compared to this one, you can get the P equals 5. Q equals pi over 4. C equals 4. And R equals 2. Let's go to number 6. The graph of y equals a sine bx minus c greater than 0 is shown below. So we need to look at this graph. First of all, we need to figure out that maximum. That's equals to 3. Minimum equals to -3. And a equals, do the subtraction, 3 minus -3 over 2. That's 6 over 2 equals 3. So for the d equals 3 plus -3 over 2 equals 0. After get the d, I will draw y equals d. That's a midline. Then you will figure out the period. It's a lot of ways to figure out the period. Normally, we use 2 maximum value. You can count the units. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 times. For this graph, for each unit stands for how many pi? This is a pi. Then between pi, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 units. Therefore, we use pi divided by 4. That's the unit of this graph. So we multiply by pi over 4. We got the 4 pi over 4, that's equals to pi. So we figure out the period equals pi. Also, you can just find out period by every other point on the midline. You can choose from here to here. This already labeled as pi. So you don't have to do any math. You know period is pi. After you get the period pi, you can get the b. That's 2 pi over p. That's equals to 2. So we figure out A, B, D. Now let's check C. When you're looking for C, you have to look at the function you are looking for, because they will give to you the information of starting points. They said x minus c, but c greater than 0. So we can do like x minus 3, for example. You know, insider is a liar. That's why you move to the right side, which means your starting point is on the right side of y-axis. You need to draw sine x pattern is on the right side of y-axis. This is the one you're drawing. Starting point will be pi over 2. That's C equals pi over 2. And we know this pattern is a positive sine x. Now we can write down that sine function. Y equals A is 3 sine. B, that's 2. Then we do x minus pi over 2. Remember, we always do x minus c. X minus c. So when you figure out the c, you have to do x minus c. Insider is a liar. Now let's go to B. The graph of y equals a cosine b x plus c. Since a, b, d are the same, we need to figure out the c. C is positive, but they're doing x plus a positive number. Let's think about x plus 2. How you do the transformation for x plus 2. Definitely move to the left side. So your starting points will be on the left side of y-axis, but you need to draw cosine pattern. That's how I draw it. This pattern, that's a positive cosine pattern. Then your C will be x coordinate for this starting point. We already figured out the unit for this graph, that's pi over 4. So this one will be negative pi over 4. C equals negative pi over 4. Now I can write down the function y equals A, that's 3 cosine. This pattern is a positive. So we do B, that's 2 x minus negative pi over 4, that's a plus pi over 4. That's your answer for B. Now let's go to number 8. First of all, you need to figure out the maximum. That's 8. Minimum. That's 2. So for amplitude, you got 8 minus 2 over 2 equals 3. And for midline, that's D equals 8 plus 2 over 2, that's 5. So we need to draw y equals 5. That's a midline. That will be here. Now let's go to period. For period, find the nearest to maximum or minimum value. Let's do minimum value this time. Count the units 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 times. What's the unit for this graph? That's pi. Each unit is pi, so times pi. I got 4 pi. That's the period. P equals 4 pi. Or you can just check between these two. That's show you here is 4 pi. Horizontal distance is 4 pi. Then you can get the P equals 4 pi. And B equals 2 pi over 4 pi. That's 1 over 2. So we already figured out A, B, D. Now let's go to C. So check this pattern. C is positive. We're doing the x minus C minus, for example, 5. That's move to the right side. So we need a starting point is on the right side, but we need to draw sine pattern. Therefore, we can draw this one. That's a positive sine pattern. Starting point will be pi, so C equals pi. Then we can figure out this equation. Y equals A is 3 sine. For B, that's 1 over 2 x minus pi. Then plus D, that's plus 5. But what if for this sine function, I find this is my pattern? Since for A, it didn't say it's positive or negative, this pattern still works. But remember, this will be negative sine x pattern, and then starting point will be 3 pi. Therefore, I can write down the function like y equals negative 3 sine 1 over 2, then x minus 3 pi plus 5. Both will be the correct answer because for A, it didn't say A is positive or negative. Now let's go to B. For B, that's this pattern. We already know C equals 0. So starting point will be on the y-axis. Here's the pattern you need to draw. This is negative cosine x pattern. Since C equals 0, I can write down the function now. Y equals negative 3 cosine. That's 1 over 2x. Then plus 5. That's your answer.